Hello and welcome to this edition of World Today. I'm Geeta Mohan. Now, amid pro-Palestinian protests in Washington, D.C., Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was on a 3-day visit to the United States of America. He also addressed a joint meeting of the U.S. Congress. The aim was to bolster support of the U.S. amid the ongoing Gaza war, which is making Israel increasingly a pariah state.
The Prime Minister of the State of Israel.
In a historic fourth address to a joint session of the U.S. Congress, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu outlined his vision for a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza amid growing criticism of Israel's military response to Hamas's October 7 attack.
The day after we defeat Hamas, a new Gaza can emerge. My vision for that day is of a demilitarized and de-radicalized Gaza. Israel does not seek to resettle Gaza, but for the foreseeable future, we must retain overriding security control there to prevent the resurgence of terror, to ensure that Gaza never again poses a threat to Israel.
Despite protests both inside and outside Capitol Hill, Netanyahu remained resolute in his defense of the ongoing conflict, which has resulted in the deaths of approximately 40,000 Palestinians in Israeli strikes.
Palestine! Free, free Palestine!
Iran is funding the anti-Israel protests that are going on right now outside this building. Not that many, but they're there, and throughout the city. Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Netanyahu expressed confidence in securing the release of hostages and urged lawmakers to provide military support to expedite the war against Hamas.
As we speak, we're actively engaged in intensive efforts to secure their release, and I'm confident that these efforts can succeed. Some of them are taking place right now. Fast-tracking U.S. military aid can dramatically expedite an end to the war in Gaza and help prevent a broader war in the Middle East. In World War II, as Britain fought on the front lines of civilization, Winston Churchill appealed to Americans with these famous words: "Give us the tools and we'll finish the job." Today, as Israel fights on the front line of civilization, I too appeal to America. Give us the tools faster and we'll finish the job faster.
Meanwhile, outside the capital, police in riot gear deployed pepper spray against pro-Palestine demonstrators who chanted slogans, waved signs, and held up effigies of the Israeli leader.
That's right.
People like Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer see fit to invite Netanyahu to speak when 56% of their voters who are polled believe this is a genocide. It's unforgivable. We are watching and we vote accordingly.
During his visit, Netanyahu also met with President Joe Biden and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris at the White House.
It is time for this war to end, and end in a way where Israel is secure, all the hostages are released, the suffering of Palestinians in Gaza ends, and the Palestinian people can exercise their right to freedom, dignity, and self-determination. There has been hopeful movement in the talks to secure an agreement on this deal. And as I just told Prime Minister Netanyahu, it is time to get this deal done.
This visit to the White House marks his first visit since before Donald Trump's departure from office in 2020. The meetings came as the international community awaits the release of loved ones detained in the conflict. With Mahashweta Lala, Bureau Report, India Today.
Now, in times of war, here are two peace activists who have come together, an Israeli and a Palestinian. They're in Washington, D.C., and are meeting with lawmakers in the United States of America, even as Netanyahu was there addressing the joint session of the Congress and engaging the US administration as also the opposition. I'm being joined by Mao Zinon and Aziz Abu Sarah, a Palestinian and an Israeli who've been going around the world and now are in DC. Thank you so much for joining us here on India Today. Mao, coming to you first. We have seen the Israeli Prime Minister in Washington, DC, but the fact is that you're there even as protests are taking place, the situation on the ground quite critical. In such a scenario, you've also engaged US lawmakers. What came out of the meetings with US lawmakers and various other bodies?
There are basically only 3 words that we are sharing in all our meetings with our representative, with the State Department. And those words are, peace is possible. Yes, peace is possible. Humanity showed in the past that after war or during war, we must work to achieve peace, because only peace will bring us security, safety, equality, dignity. Yeah, I'm ashamed of my government, and I am ashamed for those here in the US that gave standing ovation to Prime Minister Netanyahu. But I'm not letting this shame stop me for calling and acting to make peace and create a better future.
Aziz, to you, there was a standing ovation that was given to Prime Minister Netanyahu. When we've seen the two of you lose your loved ones, Mao's lost his parents in that attack on the 7th of October by the Hamas. You've lost your kith and kin, your own brother, at the hands of Israeli forces. At such a time when we've seen a growing aggression and offensive in Gaza, standing ovation for Netanyahu. Your reaction?
Right. I think what Prime Minister Netanyahu came to Congress to say is that the future must be as dark as the present. And he did not offer one glimpse of hope. He did not offer any reasons to trust that the future will be better. He did not offer a vision. And so what we came here to do is to do exactly the opposite of what he did, is to say, we have a vision and we together are the alternative to what Netanyahu was selling, that there's no peace, there's no future, there's no way to work together. The other is the enemy. It's an eternal, we're going to be an eternal cycle of violence. We live and die by the sword. And I think it's sad to see that members of Congress gave a standing ovation to that, because instead of inviting Benjamin Netanyahu, they should have invited the peacemakers, the people who are coming together, and there are so many of us. They were the ones who are supposed to address Congress, and I hope in the future that's exactly what will happen. Instead of inviting Netanyahu, invite the peacemakers to be the ones who speak.
Mao Zinon, Aziz Abu Sarah, thank you so much for joining us over here and sharing your experiences and your perspective. Thank you. And in race for the White House, it is going to be a very close contest. It no longer is a walkover for former President Donald Trump. The recent polls show Democratic nominee Kamala Harris 2 points ahead of the Republican nominee, that is President Trump, which clearly means that this is going to be a tough contest. Here is a report.
Recent polls from Reuters, Ipsos and the New York Times Siena College shows a highly competitive race between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump for the 2024 US presidential election. With President Joe Biden's exit from the race and Harris securing the Democratic nomination, the dynamics of the campaign have shifted significantly. In the Reuters Ipsos poll conducted shortly after Biden's withdrawal and the Republican National Convention, Harris leads Trump by 2 points, 44% to 42%. This margin falls within the 3 percentage point margin of error. indicating a close contest. The poll also highlights a shift from the previous week when Biden trailed Trump by 2 points. The poll underscores the rationale behind Biden's decision to drop out and for Harris to take his place on the Democratic ticket. Notably, 56% of registered voters view Harris as mentally sharp compared to 49% for Trump and only 22% for Biden. A new poll from the New York Times and Siena College shows Trump leading Harris by 1 point, 48% to 47% among likely voters, with a margin of sampling error of 3.4 percentage points. Among registered voters, Harris has 46% support compared to Trump's 48%, with a 3.3 percentage point margin of error. This poll also marks a significant change for Democrats, as Biden previously trailed Trump by 6 points. Harris is particularly strong among voters under 45, leading by 10 percentage points. However, Trump and Harris are tied on the question of who could unify the country, with Harris leading on temperament and Trump seen as a stronger leader. Both polls reveal that Harris is perceived as more mentally sharp and capable of handling challenges than either Biden or Trump. The New York Times Siena poll indicates that Harris has a higher favorability rating among Democrats than Biden, with 91% of Democrats viewing her favorable compared to 80% for Biden. Both polls emphasize on the importance of key battleground states and younger voters. Harris holds a significant lead among voters under 45, and her campaign is actively focusing on critical states like Wisconsin. Attention is now on Harris's potential running mates with names like Pete Buttigieg, Gavin Newsom, Mark Kelly, and Andy Beshear being considered. However, many voters are not familiar with these potential candidates. The combined data from both polls indicate a closely contested race between Harris and Trump, with Harris having a slight edge in some areas and Trump leading in others. The race remains fluid, with the potential for shifts in voter sentiment as the campaigns progress. The support Harris has garnered from prominent Democrats and her perceived mental sharpness could be significant factors in her favor. While Trump's established base and leadership perception remain strong points for his campaign. Bureau Report, India Today.
With President Joe Biden passing the baton of the upcoming presidential race to Kamala Harris, she now faces a new challenge: to counter the attacks targeting her gender. This was a tactic that was employed even when Hillary Clinton was running for president. But will Kamala Harris be able to overcome these challenges of gender and race bias and become the 47th President of the United States of America? Here is a report.
At a rally in Charlotte, North Carolina, Trump labeled Harris as his new victim to defeat, accusing her of misleading the public about Biden's capability to run for a second term. He disparaged her as the most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history and repeatedly mispronounced her name. Trump's criticisms of Harris focused on her stances on abortion and immigration, called her a radical left lunatic.
So now we have a new victim to defeat. Lion Kamala Harris, Lion, L-Y-I-N apostrophe. The most incompetent and far-left vice president in American history. By the way, they did a poll. She was rated the worst vice president in history. I've never seen that poll before, but that's the poll.
Donald Trump has a well-documented history of using gender and race-based attacks against his political opponents.
You're telling the enemy everything you want to do.
No, we're not.
See, you're telling
In
the enemy
2016,
everything you want
he
to do.
accused
No
Hillary
wonder you've been
Clinton
fighting-
of playing
no
the
wonder
woman
you've been
card,
fighting ISIS your
questioning her
entire adult
qualifications
life.
and mocking her voice. Trump's rhetoric suggested that Clinton's primary advantage was her gender, asserting that if she were a man, she would not receive as much support.
Well, I think the only card she has is the woman's card. She's got nothing else going. And frankly, if Hillary Clinton were a man, I don't think she'd get 5% of the vote.
To the hills of Tennessee.
Trump's campaign has taken a distinctly masculine tone. Emphasized by his entrance to the tune of James Brown's "It's a man's world."
Say fight! Fight! Say fight! Fight!
His rally featured a testosterone-charged lineup including Kid Rock, Hulk Hogan and Dana White of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, reinforcing a combative, male-dominated image.
And that is to elect
By selecting J.D. Vance, who advocates for a national abortion ban, as his running mate, Trump signaled his confidence in his base's support, prioritizing it over broadening his appeal to more moderate voters, particularly women concerned about bodily autonomy. Almost immediately after Biden's announcement, Harris began facing attacks focused on her race and gender. Republican Tim Burchett referred to Harris as DEI Vice President, a term conservatives use to disparage diversity, equality, and inclusion policies.
Now, with just 3 months to go, they don't have to introduce Vice President Harris to the public. Everyone knows who she is, but they have to talk a little bit more about her record. You know, she's focused a lot on reproductive rights for women, access to abortion. She's focused on issues like voting rights and, measures to reduce gun violence here in America. So they kind of, I think, need to talk up, what she has done over the course of this first term that a lot of Americans may not have been paying attention to.
Trump's use of misogynistic and racist rhetoric has been consistent throughout his political career. He labeled Harris as vicious and dumb and has frequently mispronounced her name. These personal attacks are intended to undermine her credibility and appeal to voters who might be swayed by such rhetoric.
If Kamala Harris gets in, she would be the most radical far-left extremist ever to occupy the White House times 10. There's never been a lunatic like this in the White House, and we've had some bad ones.
As the 2024 presidential race unfolds, Kamala Harris will likely continue to face attacks on her race and gender from Trump and his allies. These attacks reflect long-standing biases and a playbook that has been effective to some extent in the past. However, with an evolving electorate, the blatant nature of these attacks might also provoke a backlash and highlight the ongoing challenges women and people of color face in seeking political office.
I'ma keep on running 'cause the winner don't quit on themselves.
Republican nominee Donald Trump now has a new target, US Vice President Kamala Harris. In his first campaign rally after Joe Biden withdrew from the presidential race, he called Harris a lunatic. In response, Kamala Harris has said she knows how to deal with the likes of Donald Trump and she has dealt with them as prosecutor. Here is a look at the war of words.
I wouldn't have picked Vice President Trump to be vice
The war of words is full on in the race for White House. In the first week since US President Joe Biden dropped out of the re-election bid and endorsed his Vice President Kamala Harris instead, she is the target now for the Republican nominee.
If Kamala Harris gets in, she would be the most radical far-left extremist ever to occupy the White House times 10. There's never been a lunatic like this in the White House, and we've had some bad ones.
Kamala Harris in return chose Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which is where the Republican Party held their grand convention last week. And in her first campaign rally, she set the tone loud and clear.
Cheaters who broke the rules for their own gain. So hear me when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. And in this campaign, I promise you, I will proudly put my record against his any day of the week.
As the battle between the two presidential nominees started gaining momentum, President Joe Biden, in his address to the nation, explained his decision to step down from the race so late in time.
My vision for America's future all merited a second term, but nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
The baton has been passed on truly, and the war is between a 59-year-old woman of color and immigrant Asian Caribbean origin on the blue and the white, and a 78-year-old man on the red side.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out of here. You're fired.
Time for a short break. On the other side, we'll come back with reports from Paris Olympics 2024.